And often divorces come about because the father and the mother can't communicate well. They both feel they have concerns, but they both feel like they're having to walk on eggshells in order to bring up their concerns. After a while, they are keeping all their anger to themselves, and they explode in some type of volcano form. And maybe it's verbal violence, maybe it's physical violence, or some combination of both. And either way, they become more and more divorced from each other emotionally. Sometimes when they have children, they're in a sort of what I call a minimum security prison marriage. They don't want to get out of the marriage because they don't want to be there for the children, but they're really feeling in a prison for that reason. Conversely, when a man expresses a vulnerability to a woman, there might be, on the surface, she might be wanting to help, but also she's feeling oftentimes a little bit less respect for him because he's sort of like shown some weakness. And so the problem with the lack of respect is that it's extremely challenging for a woman to love a man she doesn't respect. For a woman, I just want women here to understand what's really happening inside of men when you're from a man's perspective. It's impossible to love you without feeling that when you are complaining about something, from his perspective, you are bleeding. And it would be impossible to love you without wanting to put that bandage on you and stop your bleeding immediately.
Cures, Remedies, and Beyond podcast with Dr. Irina, a Stanford-trained medical doctor, inventor, and a published author with over 30 years of clinical experience, is bringing together the science of medicine and the art of healing for ultimate vitality and health. It engages in discussions with healthcare providers, wellness experts, innovators, philosophers, spiritual and industry leaders, as well as health and wisdom seekers to provide you, the listeners, with practical tips and knowledge to help optimize your health and well-being. The Cures, Remedies, and Beyond podcast with Dr. Irina.
Welcome to the show. Today, we're discussing the secrets of healthy relationships with the New York Times bestselling author, one of the world's top 100 thought leaders, and an expert in couples communication with over 30 years of experience, Dr. Warren Farrell. Thank you for being here today, Warren.
It's a real pleasure. Looking forward to doing this with you.
You had written multiple books that have been published in over 50 countries and multiple languages, and you have been interviewed multiple times by Oprah, Barbara Walters, Larry King, Tucker Carlson, Charlie Rose, Jordan Peterson, and many others. And you have been the subject of 2 special features on ABC's 2020. You are known as a pioneer in both the women's movement, and you've been the only man elected 3 times to the board of the National Organization for Women in New York City, and have also been called by GQ magazine the Martin LutherKing of the men's movement. Your books, including Why Men Are the Way They Are and The Myth of Male Power, have become international bestsellers. And your book, The Boy Crisis, that you co-authored with John Gray, has gained significant attention in recent years, explaining why our boys are struggling and what can we do about it. I know that you just published a brand new book called Role Mate to Soulmate, where you distilled your more than 30-year experience teaching couples and psychologists the wisdom of not being defensive in response to criticism that a lot of us are struggling with, and how to feel more deeply loved and have more harmonious relationships. Is there a connection, Warren, between these last 2 books, The Role Mate to Soulmate and The Boy Crisis?
There is. I was seeing that the boy crisis was, if there's about 10 causes of the boy crisis, but I'd say that if I were to choose the primary cause, that the boy crisis resides where dads do not reside. And often dads do not reside in families where there are divorces. And often divorces come about because the father and the mother can't communicate well. They both feel they have concerns, but they both feel like they're having to walk on eggshells in order to bring up their concerns. After a while, they are keeping all their anger to themselves, and they explode in some type of volcano form. And maybe it's verbal violence, maybe it's physical violence, or some combination of both. And either way, they become more and more divorced from each other emotionally. Sometimes when they have children, they're in a sort of what I call a minimum security prison marriage. They don't want to get out of the marriage because they don't want to be there for the children, but they're really feeling in a prison for that reason. Excuse me. Other times they actually just plain get divorced. And when they get divorced, very frequently, the mom has the right to the children and the dad has to fight for children. And other times the father just sort of like walks away. Other times the mother is marrying a new man or involved with a new man and moves out of the area. And the father has to make major trips to get to the boy. And so what was happening is that I was finding that that after divorce, so with poor communication, there were often divorces, there were often a lack of father, there was often a boy crisis.
Interesting. Yeah, and as we know that approximately 40 to 50% of first marriages end in divorce, and approximately 60 to 67% of second marriages ending in divorce these days, which is definitely an astronomical proportion. So, but I know that you have specific secrets, and the subtitle to the Role Mate to Soulmate book is The 7 Secrets of Lifelong Love. And one of those secrets is what you call panning for our partner's gold, and also panning for the gold in life. Can you give examples of what you mean by each of those?
Yes, panning for a partner's gold is that most people, when they're in a relationship, when they're courting each other, they're very appreciative. But then after a while, they get into a relationship and they've shared their appreciations and so on. And after a while, they just stop doing so much appreciation. And one of the things that I find is very helpful is to create both to understand that deep, elongated love is both an art and a discipline. So when it comes to panning for gold, oftentimes what we do is when we see our partner doing, let's say our partner brings home has shopped, and she or he brings home say 32 items, and they're putting the items in the refrigerator, and somebody says, gee, it would have been good if you got the gallon, you got the gallon size carton of milk, but that's hard to fit into the refrigerator. I wish you had gotten the quart size. And so what they're picking on is the one out of the 32 items that were not done well, but not any of the 31 items that were done well, that were bought on sale, that that they got a gallon because it saved money over 2 quarts, or something along those lines. And so there tends to be a lack of appreciation and a focus on criticism. So let's say you and I were brother and sister, and you came over for Thanksgiving, and I said, Irina, I really like the pearls that you're wearing. So I really like the pearls that you're wearing is a level of specificity. But if I'm talking about, if I take that a step further, and I say, you always have such good taste in necklaces, and you never overdo it. You're very you have class, but it's engaged with simplicity, rather than sort of all this stuff that is very complex and oftentimes it distracts. And you frame you frame that very well with a really nice warm cream colored sweater that gives warmth to your skin, and that's part of your ability to sort of be able to make choices that are very that enhance you rather than take away. And you must be conscious of the fact that your cream colored sweater it has a contrast to the black seat behind you, as opposed to blending in and therefore taking the focus away from you, and which is what it should be on when you're on a show. And so it's that type of taking your compliment to a level of specificity that makes the other person feel like they're really being seen.
Wow, that's beautiful. So it's basically expanding and actually just giving this, very simple example. I have to say it really resonated with me. I could see that I'm opening up. I feel more valued. I feel, as you said, that I'm being seen. So that is such an interesting, almost like visceral feeling that I had. So when you were describing this, so with seemingly, very, very, simple kind of compliment. So yeah, that is interesting. So because we tend to, even if we remember to appreciate and give compliments, right? So a lot of people don't even remember that, but we just say one phrase without that kind of milking it, expanding it, and savoring it. So because only then we don't really feel that it was said, for ulterior motive or something else, but you actually see, the whole process behind that compliment. So that makes you feel more relaxed, and I felt more safe, so that I can open up and be there kind of with you more. So I love that. I mean, I have a question. Why do we actually criticize, Warren? I mean, why do we tend to, I always give example to some of my girlfriends that, in their husbands or boyfriends, so let's say, they have 80% of, wonderful things that, or 85% that going for them, right? So, I mean, it's like everything is wonderful. Yeah, maybe there's like 15%, something that, could be better, right? So, but then I see it so vividly that they concentrate on those 15% that is not quite right yet, right? So, and almost like ignoring all this other 85%, so of goodness that this man brought into their life, or doing for her, right? So, or vice versa, him and her, so it doesn't matter that, gender of the partner in a couple, so, and it's just fascinating to me, like, why are we doing that? Why are we criticizing, so is there some kind of evolutionary reasoning behind it?
Criticism is a little bit like fear. Criticism and fear they both have a value. You're sort of making something, you have a tendency, the best intent of a criticism is to make something better, to get that correct size carton of milk the next time, and it's and the same type of thing with the fear is you might people who had fears often live longer because their fears were not correct 99% of the time, but the one time they were, it saved their life, if you know what I mean. And so
survival,
and so survival. All of this is based on survival, and but the process. So, and also defensiveness is based on survival. Historically speaking, if we heard a criticism, it was a potential enemy. So it was biologically natural to get up our defenses so we wouldn't be killed by the enemy, or even alternatively to kill the enemy before the enemy killed us. And so that was wonderful for survival. It's just terrible for love. And so love disintegrates quite quickly when there's a lot of criticism or a lot of complaining or a lot of controlling and a lot of complacency. Oftentimes people will, once they get to love each other and they live together, they get married, let's say, they'll oftentimes, put the curlers in their hair, or they'll, wear sloppy sweats, or they'll even pass gas in front of their partner or burp, and do things that they would never do on the first date. And then when they're ready to go out to see other people, they'll say, "How does this look on me?" And they'll dress in their best clothes. And so the message there is, when you're around me, you don't care. But when you go out, the first time you care is when you go out to a party and you're going to see other people. Then you even ask me if I'm dressed adequately to be appropriate for them, but you never ask me, am I dressed to enhance your feeling about me? And am I doing something special for you? And to make myself as the way I made myself when we first went out. And so the complacent, so what I discovered in doing the Role Mate to Soulmate workshop over these years is that there were so many things that people felt that that happened in almost every relationship, and one of those is what I call the 4 C's, and one of those C's is the criticism. A second C is the feeling of that your partner is always complaining. The other is that there's controlling, and the other is that there's complacency. Now, a lot of people recognize, like if I ask people in my workshop, do you criticize more than you think that you'd like to? Most people raise their hand. If I say that do you complain more than you'd like to? Most people raise their hand. If I say, do you think you're more controlling than you'd like to be? Only a small percentage of people raise their hand. So then I ask them, well, if you feel criticized by your partner, do you feel controlled? Yeah, I do. If you feel complained about all the time, that the complaints relate to you, do you feel controlled? Yeah, I do. And so can you see how your partner might feel like they're feeling controlled by you? And so those are some of the types of things we work on. And that takes a discipline as well as an art. So for example, the discipline might be that Liz and I, my wife and I, every Wednesday night, and I just share 3 appreciations with her, but those 3 appreciations are usually, not always, but when I'm at my best, those 3 appreciations are shared at multiple levels of specificity. And if I were to give another example of multiple levels of specificity, and we take it back to Thanksgiving, somebody might say, I really appreciated the dinner. That's level of specificity, number 1. And number 2 is especially the way you cook the turkey. Specificity level number 2. And then specificity level number 3 is the skin is so crispy. Then you might say that the dressing was really good, but it was so moist, and you seem to have such wonderful spices in it. Was that parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme, or some other Simon and Garfunkel spice? And and so you would sort of go deeper and deeper into the compliment. And then when you ask for the recipe for the turkey, the person feels like, wow, you feels really seen, that what they did to prepare that turkey was really seen at a deeper level than just, oh, you're a great cook.
That's beautiful, and that does take some creativity, obviously, right? So, and generosity.
It's the art and the discipline. You're absolutely right. The creativity is the art, and the discipline is both in setting aside time once per week to do that. And number 2 is also a discipline in thinking about going beyond what is there about the cook that's you as a cook that's good, what is there about the turkey that's good, what is there about that dressing that is not just good dressing, but the moistness and the spices. So our lazy brain just stops at the, you're a great cook, the turkey was really great. And that is great. And people will say to me, you're this book or that book was great, and it really helped me. And I usually ask them, I'll say, in what way? Oh, wow, most people aren't used to saying, pinpointing it, but once they do pinpoint it, it helps them and it helps me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's quite transformative, I have to say. So I really like that. So, and of course, what you said, that the criticism, complaining, complacency, and controlling, so which can be subtle, as you just described, so that we're not even aware that it is a controlling situation. No wonder that sometimes, one of the persons in a couple, might feel like they're in the high security prison, as you said. So that's a very interesting example. So, and stay there just for children. But so, and you said that appreciation definitely helps to, reverse certain levels of dissatisfaction. So is there anything else that that helps, us to have much more generative, productive, and loving communication and relationships.
Oh, absolutely. There's, I think one of the things is just understanding things like that every virtue. I have a whole series of wisdom, what I call wisdoms in the course. And one of them is something I say that every virtue taken to its extreme becomes a vice. And we almost always fall in love with somebody. And then when we fall in love with them, sometimes uh, they maybe we are, let's say, a spiritual new age person, and we love doing yoga and being spontaneous and just talking from our heart. But we never learned. We weren't very good at earning money. And then maybe we married somebody who was really good at earning money because that gave us that security and that feeling that we could be free to be spiritual and do that type of thing. And then and then the person earning money, we begin to sort of criticize them for not attending the yoga workshops or the spiritual workshops, or not being free and sweet. But initially, we were attracted to them not because they were free, sweet, and spiritual, but rather, and they read the Dalai Lama every day, but but rather that they were they were a rock, and they were solid, and they provided security for us. And so then we begin to criticize them for what we were attracted to them for, or the virtue of being a strong, solid breadwinner, a provider and protector. That virtue, when taken to its extreme, became a vice. The person was not in touch with their feelings, not able to share from their heart, oftentimes, and wasn't very spontaneous. Didn't take time to go do yoga, just relax. And so now we're criticizing them without realizing that the choice of our partner is the best single statement of the choice of our values. And then when you combine that with the choice of our values, oftentimes when we are an extreme personality, we have to choose somebody who is extreme in the opposite direction to balance out the whole relationship. And then we begin to be critical of them for their extreme. And so what I ask people in the workshop to do is to, before you criticize your partner, look in the mirror and look at what were the values for which you chose your partner, and then to spend time focusing on what you appreciate about what that partner brings to the relationship, that she brings a whole, or he brings a whole spiritual orientation that you'd never thought of, or that they can just sort of take time to meditate. You never even knew how to meditate, or conversely, that when the bills come, they're taken care of, not magically, but through the hard work of somebody knowing how to budget and so on. And so these are the types of appreciations I ask people to seek out in their partner, and the type of sort of, those are just two examples of the 11 wisdoms that I ask people to focus on.
I love that. Yeah, that's so simple. And I like how practically oriented you are. So in your, guidance, and I know that you lead the workshops, and I think you have some upcoming workshop at Esalen, so for the couples communication. So, and I know that you have very unique way of also approaching that criticism, that I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on, if, for example, there is a certain thing that the partner wants to express and wants to, let's say, in a critical way, so talk to another one. So you do have a very unique processes.
They do. There's two things that work together here. One is that first understanding that, as we were talking about before, that it's biologically natural to be defensive in response to criticism. And so, and everybody, it's the only criticism most people have about themselves is that I am more defensive than I would like to be. And so what I ask people to do is to basically say that before you handle criticism, you need to alter that biologically natural propensity to be critical. So before you're here, so therefore, don't. I ask both couples to set aside 2 hours a week that I call a caring and sharing time. And during those 2 hours a week, there's only one criticism that is allowed to be shared, or the person doing the criticism doesn't call it a criticism, they call it a concern or a request or a suggestion for improvement. But the person receiving a suggestion for improvement or hearing a concern usually experiences it as a criticism. So I say, before you express that, I have them go into, I have them alter their natural biological state by doing a temporary workaround. And that temporary workaround is for them to meditate into 6 mindsets that allow them to associate the criticism they're about to hear with not rejection, but an opportunity to be more deeply loved. So, for example, one of those 6 mindsets is what I call the love guarantee. And the love guarantee goes like this. If I provide a safe space for you to say anything you want, in whatever tone of voice you want, in whatever way you want, if I provide a safe space for you to do that, you will feel more secure with me. Therefore, you will feel more loved by me. Therefore, you will feel more love for me. Then
Yeah,
I
that's
ask each person in the workshop to do as a second mindset, and I don't have time to go through all 6, but I'll give you a second one. I have everybody in the workshop sit back to each other and to write the answers to these questions that their partner will never see the answer to. And so I have them, I ask them a question like, if your partner were about to be killed and you knew that with 100% certainty that you could save her or his life, but you'd have a 50% chance of risking your own life or dying in the process, would you do it? Yes, no, uncertain. So they put down a couple of words: die, yes, no, uncertain. And then I take it to a lighter level. Would you be willing to lose an arm or a leg if you knew that with 100% certainty you could save their life? So then everybody takes their piece of paper, they wrinkle it into a tight little ball. All the men throw their piece of paper in one corner, all the women in another corner. They mix pieces of paper up and they choose somebody else's paper, read about it, and about 90% of the men say that they would be willing to die, willing to risk dying to save their partner's life.
wow.
And about 85% of the women say they would be willing to do that too, which is a higher percentage than many people
Wow.
think. Now, the one exception I make is make believe there are no children involved. I have to take children out of the picture in order to make this happen at this level. So then the first mindset becomes, if I'm willing to risk my life to die for you, least I can do is listen to you. It puts
Yes,
listening
indeed.
to your partner.
Exactly.
Put listening to your partner
It's a very good comparison, yeah. In
Exactly.
the level of sacrifice, yes. I can give you minutes of uncomfortable, listening.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
And so and then I do 4 more mindsets like that create a temporary, and the emphasis is on the word temporary, a temporary time where the person is able to associate even criticism given badly, even information told in a way that is not accurate, even voice raised, that providing the safe environment for all of that is just leads your partner to feel like so much more secure inside and safe, and being able to not have to worry about is what I'm saying here exactly right? Is that true? But just inside of you is all sorts of angst and maybe distortions of what that experience was like. And at the time that you're emptying that garbage out, what I call the pollution out, is that you don't want to be interrupted and called on that, and you just want a chance to get all of that inside of you out. And when it comes out and you know it's going to be safely able to be heard, you don't store it up inside of you and then it comes out one day as a volcano.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
with that
so
eruption, yeah. So
now, so
it
that's
hurts people. Yeah, people remember that. So and especially, I think women have that black box of memories stored,
yes.
and with one little trigger, so the whole file becomes alive and vivid.
Yeah. Well,
So,
remember, it was men's historical job to provide and protect women. And so, and women, when women asked for protection or they complained, what they discovered is two things: who was interested in saving them and who was capable of saving them. So it was part of female selection process to complain. And so it's, we need to not so much blame the woman as blame the fact that we all needed to survive. And, women needed to find good protectors, not just for themselves, but also for their children. And that's the way we passed on the genes, so to speak.
oh, that's so
But
interesting. Yeah, we're
now
wired.
the other
Hmm.
part of that I was saying that's the caring and sharing part of the workshop. But the next issue is, oftentimes the other big part of that's only 2 hours a week. So the other 166 hours a week is what I call a conflict-free zone. And it teaches couples how to, when a criticism does come up, how do we get ourselves not to respond to that criticism by either our defense or our attack on our partner, we sidestep the criticism and counterattack them. You came home late and you didn't call. Well, a week ago you came home late and you didn't call. Type of response. And then, well, you do it much more frequently than I do. And when you do it, it's sometimes when you're out with, it seems like that you're out playing with the guys and you could at least call me and text me or whatever, and on and on and on it goes, up. So the result of that is that most people are afraid to say anything to their partner because they sense that the response is not going to be being heard, but it's going to be an escalation. So how do you go through the entire week outside of that conflict, outside of the caring and sharing time, to preserve a conflict-free zone? And
Yeah.
so what I work with couples to do is to be able to do a whole series that allow them to maintain the conflict-free zone. So, for example, once they've gone through the caring and sharing and really felt heard by their partner, when their partner criticizes them, they can either say to themselves, I have a couple of options here. Option number one is I can respond with my counterattack or my defense, and that will almost invariably result in an escalation that will probably result in both of us feeling pretty angry with each other and spoil the evening, or more than that. Or alternatively, they can visualize that whatever response they have will be actually heard by their partner in the caring and sharing time, as opposed to responded to defensively by their partner at the moment. And so I have them do a whole series of processes that they can choose from. One of those processes is journaling, which is just writing down, going to your computer and writing down exactly. I have 4 stages of journaling I ask the partners to do. Stage number 1 is write down all the reasons you were 100% right and all the reasons your partner is 100% wrong. And so that just gets that stuff out there. And then
Righteousness,
the
yeah.
self-righteous, exactly what I call it. I call it the self-righteous stage. Right?
Yeah.
Stage number two is, finding one little thing that your partner said that might be helpful, that you could actually hear, and that might be helpful, that is right. And then finding all the things, and then actually expressing an empathy to your partner. And then if at the end of that process, and the other processes I ask people to do to maintain the conflict-free zone, if at the end of the week they're still angry about that issue, most issues, 99%, no, about 90% of issues disappear during the course of the week. But the 10% that don't, those are really good candidates for bringing up at the caring and sharing time. And so those are the two of the 7 secrets. Appreciations is another one that I work with people on, that require both an art and a discipline.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a wonderful tool because obviously, when we're tired or we're hungry, right? So, I mean, there's certain biological states, so you just don't have tolerance is different, your threshold is different. And just having that little diary, as you said, so just put it in writing and do a quick process might really diffuse that situation. So
Yeah.
that's actually quite brilliant. Yeah. So I also wanted to ask you, men and women are not only having like different social roles and behavioral, expectations, I guess. So, but also, we're all wired differently. So, and that leads them to some differences in expressing vulnerability. So, and I remember you said that when a man expresses his vulnerability to man, it increases his vulnerability. And in contrast, when a woman asks others for help and expresses vulnerability, she becomes stronger. So, could you just explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Sure. When a woman expresses vulnerability, like let's say she cries, and there are 6 men at the table, or in the house with her, every man is wanting to solve her problem, and oh sweetie, we can do this, we can do that, that type of thing. Don't worry about it. You're wonderful. All sorts of assurances just pipe up. Biologically inside of men to any female who cries, or a child who cries, just like with a child who cries. But conversely, when a man expresses a vulnerability to a woman, there might be, on the surface, she might be wanting to help, but also she's feeling oftentimes a little bit less respect for him, because he's sort of like
Exactly.
shown some weakness.
Yes.
And so the problem with the lack of respect is that it's extremely challenging for a woman to love a man she doesn't respect.
Exactly.
And so the man feels like he is sharing that vulnerability at the risk of her loving him, as opposed to when she shares her vulnerability, we don't feel less love, we feel more needed. And we feel if we can solve the problem, we will feel more loved. So her expressing her vulnerability leads to him feeling like he has an opportunity to be more loved. Whereas if he expresses his own vulnerability, he's quite sure it will lead to him being less loved.
Wow, interesting. And that's why men tend to love, quote unquote, solving her problems, and we don't understand that because we just want to, of course, sometimes just, express ourselves and purge.
Yeah.
So, and that helps us to feel better and feel more safe. But meanwhile, he wants to really solve it. So that's his way of being there stronger for her. So especially in her time of seemingly weakness and need.
And here's the fascinating dynamic. So a woman might choose a man because he's strong and has the provider protector inside of him. So let's say she chooses a successful man, and she really respects him because he is successful. But then she starts talking about problems that she has, and he starts doing exactly what he did to become successful. At work, when somebody presented a problem, let's say somebody tried to, let's say he's an executive at Boeing, let's say, and somebody's coming with a better door fixed for Boeing. And, and so the executive at CEO, the CEO guy is going to be thinking, okay, how does this compare with the other, 13 door, fixes that I've been presented with? Can this be adapted to the makers in Japan? Can this be part of our distribution network? Do we have the engineers to do this? Which facilities would we have to open? How much would this cost? How much could we get away with it? We don't worry about it at all, type of thing. So the CEO, when somebody is talking, it's functional for that CEO to be figuring out 100 different ways that she or he can solve the problems while the salesperson is talking to them, or another executive is talking to them. So what creates success at work creates failure often in love, because when his wife is talking and he's using that same technique of trying to figure out all the different ways he can solve her problem, she just wants to not have somebody solve her problem. She just wants to be heard. And so what I have to do when I'm working with CEOs is to say, the best thing I can tell them is this: listening to her without thinking inside of your mind what the solutions are. That is solving the problem.
Yeah, because women are looking for that nurturing, compassionate shoulder, basically, in her obviously partner, so not the solution.
They're looking for two things. One is when they're venting, they want to just be heard. But they also wanted that successful man that could solve problems. They just didn't want those problems to be solved as she was talking about how she was being hurt. They wanted, and it's actually an insult to women to solve the problem while she's talking. That's really important for men to understand, because if the insult is, if the man can solve a problem in a few seconds that she hasn't been able to solve in her whole life up until that point, isn't that somewhat condescending? Isn't that really insulting to her intelligence? So something else is going on there. And what's going on there is just that she needs some time to unload the things that's inside of her. And then the best thing you can do to respect a woman in a circumstance like that is when she says, do you have any ideas? And for the man to say, I think I might, but share any ideas that you have first. Because then you're facilitating, then you're showing the respect for her ability to also, in addition to venting her feelings, to be able to go inside of her and use the logic mind to solve some of her own problems.
It feels like she is inside of her, she feels that she's incapable and indirectly, less off and criticize, of course. So when at that moment he is just solving for her. So that she is not quite enough, so to speak. Yeah, interesting.
For a woman, I just want women here to understand what's really happening inside of men when you're from a man's perspective. It's impossible to love you without feeling that when you are complaining about something, from his perspective, you are bleeding. And it would be impossible to love you without wanting to put that bandage on you and stop your bleeding immediately. That's what his solving the problem is about, from his heart, from that's where he's coming from. It's an expression of love, and it's part of what you fell in love with, the Savior, but it's also part of what you hate at the moment that it's and those other moments that it's happening. And so it's really almost like if God created us, she or he is playing a dirty trick on us. all these, or is laughing upstairs there.
What a good example, actually. Yeah. So he's trying to put a tourniquet on my bleeding wound at the moment. So yeah, actually, just that image helps to
Oh,
be more
good.
forgiving if in a moment, so partner kind of tries to still solve your problems rather than to listen. So that's beautiful. And now I have, I guess, a leading question about the man's vulnerability. So, but does this mean that men not supposed to be vulnerable with his love partner?
No, I think it's really that's the value of the caring and sharing time, is that so when the woman's expressed the way that the things that he has said, I'm sorry, that she feels upset with or whatever, and then there's sort of like there's an expectation in the structure that he will also share what's bothering him. And if one of the things that he notices after he does that is that she has distanced from him after he shares some vulnerability, then that needs to become the topic of another caring and sharing. That I felt that after I said that I didn't know that I really wanted to get to that next level at work. I just want more time at home. I want more time to relax. I don't want to climb the corporate ladder and unbecome a human being. I want to be a human. I don't want to be a human doing. And then if he notices that, gee, I really thought that you were a super successful guy and that you didn't have to, that you would just go out there and do it. Then like, let's say he's a firefighter and he doesn't want to be fire chief. He just wants to be a regular firefighter. And sometimes women would feel, gee, I thought you had a fire chief inside of you. I thought you had a, you know,
Ambition.
ambition, yes, and then that he can bring up that, I sense that after I said that you distanced from me, and this is, but what and then he can deepen his explanation of that rather than feel fearful of talking with her about it. When she's completely listening, he can be able to say something, sweetie, I want more time with you. To me, that's being a human being, not a human doing. I want more time with the family. That's what all this is about. My father, grew up during Depression years, and he did not spend time with the family. He just put all his focus into work, work, work. And at the end of his life, he said, I wish I'd spent more time with you guys. I don't want to repeat that pattern. And so it's being able to be more vulnerable. But the importance of women being able to hear men, this men's fear of communicating vulnerability, their vulnerabilities to women. But when a man communicates with other men his vulnerabilities, the other men lose respect for the man as well. That's why men keep it to themselves, drink instead of reveal,
Right.
get angry instead of share. And so it's so important for women to understand that men often feel women won't hear them when they express their vulnerabilities. Other men won't hear them when they express their vulnerabilities. Women and men will both lose respect for him when he reveals his vulnerabilities. So why even get in touch with his vulnerabilities? Men don't like to go into places where it's going to be dysfunctional to get any deeper in it. There's nowhere to go there. So bottom line is just avoid them to begin with. And so men disconnect from their feelings and connect to their alcohol.
Right, right. And of course, there is no deepening of the love between those, between two of them. It's a little bit more shallow, so to speak, if the man, not continues to, get deeper and deeper in even his fears. And it's good to know that, men can still be vulnerable and express it in the, safer container. So, and explain the reasoning, so that his partner can hear. So, and that, instead of her thinking like, oh my gosh, I married this maybe, non-ambitious, so maybe, lazy firefighter who doesn't want to become a chief, whatever reasons that she starts, brewing inside of her head. So, but apparent reason actually was very different, so he actually wanted to spend more time with her, with children. And that actually reminds me your John Lennon story that you had shared at your TED Talk. So that was such a great story. Maybe you can tell us again.
Well, it was, I've started some 300 men's awareness groups, or what they used to call consciousness raising groups, and about 250 women's groups. I used to go to places where I spoke and pass out pads and have all the women who were interested in signing up for a women's group and the men who were interested in signing up for men's groups do so. And then afterwards, I would annoy the custodians who wanted to shut down the place and work with the women and the men to form men's and women's groups. And then after a few months of being separate groups, talking by themselves with each other, they would alternate every other session. They would meet alone, and the other sessions they would meet with each other. And so I was living in New York City at the time, and I formed a number of men's groups in the city. And so I was at this party. I used to write for Ms. Magazine, the feminist magazine, and they were having a party. I think it's their 10th anniversary or something. And so at that party, some guy comes up to me and says, "Are you Warren Farrell?" And I go, "Yes." And he goes, "Well, I joined a men's group that you formed. You had already left the group, so I never met you. But I joined this men's group that you formed, and it really changed my life." And so I said, "Well, wow, how so?" And he said, "Well, I ended up, one of the things you told all the men's groups to ask each other is, what's the biggest hole in your life?" And I kind of smiled when the other guys were sort of answering that question, but then it got to me and I had to come up with something. And I realized that the biggest hole in my heart was the question. And he said, the biggest hole in my heart was the fact that I was so preoccupied with my business that I really didn't pay much attention to my wife or my son. And so I decided that, and so I just left that on the table, and then I realized that was such a big hole in my heart now, because I ended up getting a divorce and moving away from my wife and my son. I hardly ever see him, and my new wife is pregnant, and we just found out that it was going to be a son. And I'm fearing that I'm going to repeat that whole pattern over again, being so involved with my business that I'm not going to pay any attention to my son, and my wife will also feel a distance from me. And so he said, the men's group said to me, "Well, what are you going to do about that? Have you talked to your wife about that?" And he said, no, I haven't. That would be kind of a silly thing to do. And they encouraged me to talk to my wife, and she said, "John, do whatever you'd like to do. You've earned it." And he said, "This is stupid because I have a lot of legal contracts and so on." And the men's group said to me, "What is it, John? Do you own the business, or does the business own you?"
Mm.
And he said, that really got to me. And I realized that I was letting the business own me. But I knew I'd be sued, and I knew I'd be breaking contracts, and I knew I'd be disappointing people if I did do all this. But I decided that what I really wanted to do was to spend 5 years just raising my son. And so at this point in time, when I met him, he was about a year and a half into, his son was about a year and a half old, Sean. And I said, "Was this a good decision to do this?" And he said, "It wasn't a good decision. It was the best decision of my life." He said, "I never really had a clue what love really meant, even though I wrote about it, until I really brought up my son. And every bite he takes, every request he makes, I'm caring more about that than anything else, and that's really love." And so at that point in time, interestingly, I had just come back from my first book tour, and he and I were sitting at this table talking about this for about an hour or so. And some guy comes up to me at the party, or comes up to the table at the party, and says, "Can I have your autograph?" And I reach up to get his autograph, to take his paper and pen to get his autograph. And the guy looks very embarrassed. And I said, "What's happening here?" And he goes, "Well, I certainly, yeah, I want your autograph, but could I have his autograph first?" And that was when I asked, I saw that he must be known and better known than I was. And so I said, "Well, what's your name?" He said, "Actually, I liked it just the way it was." Then I persuaded him to tell me his last name. He said, "Lennon." And I go, "Oh, John Lennon." And then I'm proud of myself for remembering that. "Aren't you a singer? And aren't you?" Then I was really proud of myself. I said, "Aren't you with a group?" And he goes, "Yes." And I said, "No, what's the name of the group?" And he goes, "The Beatles." At which point, that was just above my level of ignorance. I had been so busy working on my books and stuff like that. I never watched TV, and so I was just totally dislocated from the world of pop culture.
That is amazing story, Warren. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, wow. You influenced John Lennon. How about that? So we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back.
This podcast represents the personal views and opinions of the host and the guests and does not constitute medical advice. The statements contained in this podcast have not been evaluated by the FDA. Any products or treatments mentioned are not intended to diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. And now your host, Dr. Irina.
Really?
Very interesting, Warren. You also said that another secret is in healthy, wholesome, I guess, deep relationships is playing together, or that couples that play together stay together.
Okay.
What do you mean by that? And can you give us some examples?
Yes. Just for example, remembering to my wife and I are cooking dinner, and we usually have a little bit of music on in the background, and then I hear a music that is really either touches our heart or something like that. Just turning that louder and asking her to dance with me, or turning on some fast music and playfully dancing to the fast music. I love playing while I'm doing fast dancing. And that just sort of breaks up our, focus on, okay, we have to get the dinner made, the salad made, everything, prepared in time, make sure it all comes out hot, et cetera, et cetera. We sort of focus on the day. And that sort of allows us to sort of like break that mood and connect as human beings together. I got thinking about this also when I was back to high school reunions a couple of years ago. And one of the, I mentioned, one of the people in my class said, "What are you doing now, Warren?" I said, "I'm writing this book, called Role Mate to Soulmate." And he goes, "Oh, well, what's that about?" And I explained what it's about. And he goes, "Oh, he said, my wife and I, we just have the greatest relationship ever." And I looked at her to see whether she agreed or disagreed. Oh yeah, she agreed. And I said, "Well, what do you?" So I said, "What do you account for that?" And he said, and he gave me. He said, "Well, we do a lot of things like what I just mentioned, but also we do something he called whimsies together. Like he would, like he'd be out mowing the lawn, and all of a sudden he'd see this really beautiful." Sort of mushroom in the lawn, and just be astonished at how gorgeous it was. But his wife had actually planted an artificial mushroom out there, and then was watching him, stumble across it. And she would play all these little, sort of whimsies with him that would just, make him laugh. He would go in and take a bite of a sandwich, and the sandwich would have, something different in it than was ordered, but she had planted that different thing in the sandwich, while he was off to the bathroom, or, that type of thing, or, yeah. So they have all these sort of like little arrangements, and they play with each other, sort of like a type of teasing and playfulness. And then also knowing how to play with the kids, knowing the value of teasing. And how when teasing can go too far. Teasing is a really good example of every virtue taken to its extreme becomes a vice. A certain amount of teasing is really helpful for children, being able to do what I would call experience the fruit smoothie of criticism, meaning that, let's say that in teasing, the criticism that you maybe want to impart to your son or daughter, think of that as maybe wheatgrass. But the teasing is like a fruit smoothie that makes the wheatgrass go down much more gently and much more. So you might say to your son, "Oh, you got that. You got one more cherry than your sister. I see. When you took out the cherries. Well, why don't you just take all the cherries away from your sister and just eat them all yourself? Just like take them and just go like this, and let's be, and then your son is seeing that he was caught, so to speak, and that but instead of like, you shouldn't take the cherries from your sister. You're so selfish and and greedy, and you do this type of thing all the time. You're so greedy. Now the child is able to absorb the wheatgrass of that little criticism because it came in the fruit smoothie of exaggerating it and playing with it and so on. And the son can laugh at himself, or the daughter can laugh at herself, and everybody can take in the fruit smoothie. So those are all different examples of just different ways of playing both together with your partner, but also playing with the kids as well, and then having the playing with the kids be a type of playing together as a family.
That's beautiful, yeah. So the humor, laughter, obviously, I think the essential ingredients for successful partnership and marriage. So, and I understand that the secrets that you, of course, teach people in your in the workshops or the book Rollmate to Soulmate can be applied not only to your loved ones, but and family, friends, colleagues, and even political opponents. Really, that's quite
Yes,
amazing.
yeah. What the way it felt to her is that there is this patriarchy, and there's these examples of a patriarchy, and that oftentimes, women for years weren't able to, weren't given permission to work outside of the home, and all their talents were sort of wasted, and the world lost those talents, and she didn't have inside of herself the sense of competence that she might have had, and this created a lack of self-esteem and things like this. And so let her talk about that and hear how that is from her perspective, and then also be working with her to know how to hear it from your perspective without interrupting each other. Secondly, that almost every virtue taken to its extreme becomes a vice, so that it was really valuable for the father might see that the virtue that the daughter is expressing as she comes home from college is the virtue of her being able to be self-sufficient, the virtue of her being able to have a life where she isn't dependent on a man, and how where she can do things that maybe her mom didn't ever have a chance to do because she was more in a traditional role. And so let me see, before I jump on the vices of her seeing me as a patriarchal oppressor, that I jump on the virtues that maybe got taken to an extreme, where the desire to be started to play victim and ironically become more of exactly what the feminist movement did not want her to be, was a victim. But she's moving into that. And so very frequently when we hear something that we would like to jump on as being a problem, start with where it started, which was often in a virtuous place, a good place. That as people built institutions around it, like say in the institution, let's say, of gender studies, in which everybody believed that there was a feminist perspective that would be the only perspective tolerated, and that women saw themselves as victims, that seeing themselves as victim might have gone too far and become a vice that inside of that woman's functionality. And conversely, might his provider protector role might disconnect him from knowing how to be successful in love, as we talked about before.
Yeah, exactly opposite. Yeah, from what we, of course, are striving. So we want to
Yes.
be empowered. We want to have self-expression. So not necessarily victims, right? So now I understand why in 2009 was that you received a call from the White House requesting you to be an advisor to the White House Council on Women and Girls.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but you
That
actually
was
end up
under the Obama administration. Yes.
right, but then it led you to creating and chairing a commission on boys and men. I understand, right?
Yes, what happened was that I got the call from the White House asking me to be an advisor because of my background of having been on the board of the National Organization for Women in New York City. Somebody at the White House knew of that, and so that led to my being asked to be an advisor to the White House Council on Women and Girls that President Obama had created, and I said that would be wonderful. That council, by the way, never got formed, but anyway, that's beside the point. I said, that there also needs to be a White House Council on Men and Boys, or a gender policy council for both sexes, issues and problems. And so the woman who was asking me to be the advisor said, "That's great. Why don't you make up a proposal? I don't have the authority to be able to create that, but we can run it up the ladder and see where it goes." And so I got together what I thought were about the 20 best thought leaders in the country on boys and men's issues, and we created a proposal, and then we ran it by the Boy Scouts, and they created an official approval of it. And they had a once per year meeting with the president. All the presidents of all parties have these meetings with the president of the United States once a year. And so we had an Eagle Scout get ready to present to President Obama this proposal to create a White House Council on Boys and Men. And so just outside of the office and getting ready to walk in, Valerie Jarrett, the advisor to President Obama, the chief advisor to him, looked over all the items on the agenda for the Boy Scouts to talk with President Obama about, and she crossed off the White House Council on Boys and Men. And so that, and we asked her why, and she said, "Oh, the world is about boys and men, and the world is about men. It's dominated by men. The one little piece of the pie that women have, this White House Council on Women and Girls, you're not going to take that away by having it be focused, also having another council on boys and men be focused." So we were never able to get through to her, and never able to do that. And then President Biden created a White House Council, a gender policy council, but the explicit language of the Gender Policy Council allows it to be focused only on the issues of girls and women, and explicitly not on the issues of boys and men, which of course makes it which of course discriminates against it, not only discriminates against boys and men, but discriminates against gay men and gay boys, and discriminates against boys and men who are who are not only boys and men, but they're boys and men, as I said, who are gay as well. So it's also really homophobic, and it also discriminates against Black men, and therefore is racist. And so this is some of the challenge that we've had to get across boys and men's issues.
That's a shame, yeah, because I think this is also a timely topic, that we need to start discussing, because there is so much mental health problems, and not to mention the suicide rate is really high. And I think you mentioned that after divorce, boys have like 6 times more likely to commit suicide, and even men after divorce have 10 times prevalence of the suicide after divorce. I didn't know that, so I read it.
That's during custody battles, men are 8 times as likely to commit suicide as the mom is. And then in general, an example of this that if somebody's listening and interested in this, there's 6 chapters of evidence as to why there's a boy crisis and why that's a global crisis. This is not just U.S. Data, but almost all these, what I'm going to share now, and along with 70 some other metrics of boys having problems. Most of these are global among developed nations. They're different in less developed nations. But I'll give you one example. When boys and girls are 9 years of age, they rarely commit suicide, and when they do it about equally. Between the ages of 10 and 14, boys commit suicide twice as often as girls do. Between the ages of 15 and 19, boys commit suicide 4 times as often as girls do. Between the ages of 20 and 25, boys commit suicide 5 times as often as girls do. And that's data that's fairly similar in almost all developed nations. And so when we have this type of thing, and this is obviously a problem of mental health, and yet we have 8 federal offices of women's health and no federal offices of men's health, none, even though men die sooner of 14 out of 15 of the leading causes of death.
Wow, that's so sad. Yeah, that's definitely important topic, and I understand that with your new book you're trying, of course, to fix the family union, so to hopefully improve relationships, improve loving relationships between a father and mother, and prevent, of course, divorce, and prevent, of course, acceleration of the mental illnesses, and the fact that boys, don't even understand what their purpose is any longer. It's so because the role, gender roles and the societal roles are all kind of getting, mixed up together. It's really a difficult situation, I think, going on, as you said, worldwide. And I really have to thank you for this new book. And I also understand that you have an online video course that is designed to accompany this new book. Both of them are available now?
Yes, the online video course is for people that can't afford to attend the course. I wanted this process to be available to basically anybody. And so when I finished the Role Made to Soulmate book, I wanted people to be able to have, I have an appendix in the book that gives a QR code to the online course. So instead of it being available for, it'll take you about 10 hours to do with your partner, but it takes you through all the exercises that I do in the workshop and solves the problems that came up that for couples in the workshops doing each exercise. And so it really is a lot like attending a workshop of mine. And that and the book itself, the Role Made to Soulmate book, is able to expand on the things that I talk about in the online course. But the truth is that doing the exercises with your partner is far more powerful than just reading the book alone. And so I wanted to make that available to everybody. So when you buy the book, it's actually cheaper to buy the book and then buy the course through the appendix in the book than it is to buy the course alone. So instead of it being $197, it's $97.
Oh, that's very generous of you. Yeah, I see that you're trying to fix this problem one family at a time, one happy couple at a time. And that is such an impressive work that you're doing, and providing the health and healing. Yeah, so Thank you so much, Warren. That was such a important, I feel like, and timely discussion as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. It's been just a pleasure talking with you. That you ask really good questions. You're thoughtful, and I can feel you're listening fully and attentively, and it's sort of is very rejuvenating.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us at Cures, Remedies, and Beyond, exploring science and the wisdom of health and healing. We hope to see you next time.